Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, your Equinox News Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Hope. I'm the Managing Executive Editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Chloe Erno, the News Editor. And today we're joined by Jacob, our Administrative Executive Editor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's been a little bit now since you've been on last, and a little bit of a title change as well, since former Administrative Executive Editor Tim is now off in Berlin, Germany. So good for him, but also things still got to get done. So, he stepped up to the plate, and it's been cool so far to see you sort of take on a different role. Do you want to talk a little bit about that so far?
Yeah, it's obviously a much different role from my sports editor role that I previously had and still kind of hold, which we're still searching for. But with admin, it's a lot of business budgeting stuff. I'm sort of conducting, whether it's trips or whether it's getting merch and planning our upcoming Media Org Madness. It's a lot of different stuff that is sort of behind the scenes of the Equinox that even I didn't know really existed as an editor role. It's really nice to sort of contribute to the Equinox in a way that's not just a single section. Doing this, I sort of feel like I can oversee sort of the whole paper, but not in a controlling way, in a way that I can feel good about it when we put it out on Thursdays. And I also sort of get to look over all the material, which is something as sports editor I didn't get to do before. And so now I can kind of edit along with Nate on our layout nights when we're creating the paper and get an even deeper look into the campus and also our newspaper.
Why should someone potentially help you out and apply for sports editor so you don't have to also do that?
Sports editor is amazing. I mean, there's no secret here. I wouldn't have been admin if Tim hadn't gone away from the position. I love sports. I love doing the sports section because you just get so close to athletes and the sort of behind the scenes of athletes as well, and the coaches and faculty of our athletic department. They're not just sort of, bouncing a ball or shooting pucks or doing all that. They're people, and it's really nice to get a look into them and their training and their sort of headspace, and that goes along with the coaches who, command these teams and command a lot of the student athletes that we have around on campus. And it develops you as a writer, as a interviewer, as all those different parts, as long as any other section editor would be. But if you have a love for sports and if you have a passion for whether it's competition or any of the athletic teams that we have around campus, I would recommend getting into it. You get to really dive deep into our athletic program.
Definitely. We only have two e-board roles left to fill. We have the sports editor and a business manager. And we have an amazing team right now. And we've been bringing on a few new people semi-recently. And so I would encourage you to think about it, check it out if you're listening or viewing, because, being a part of this has been, no secret. One of the best or, the best thing that I've done in my college career. I assume a lot of other editors would say the same or share that sentiment. So do think about it. But also, I would like to touch on, before we get into the proper news recap here, once again, Media Org Madness, like Jacob was talking about. That is happening very, very soon. By the time this comes out, that will be happening tomorrow, Saturday, March 7th, from 5 to 9 p.m. in the Mabel Brown Room. You heard me talk about it already, but we got tabling, interactive activities from 7 different organizations, student media organizations on campus. We have the Kahoot and Trivia with gift card prizes to local media selling stores. And we have the headlining event, the real-life Dress to Impress contest. Dress up as your favorite character from any media, whether that be movies, books, games, you name it. It's a really fun time. Last year was a blast, and even though it was such like a new, different thing, and we were still like getting a hold of like what we wanted the event to look like, a decent amount of people did come out, and I think this year with having even more planning and foresight, having even more like commitments and organizations early on, just being so invested in this just as much as we are, it's going to be even better this year. And you don't have to stay the whole time. You don't have to participate in every single activity. But if you could just drop by, even for like an hour, even if you only want to do the trivia, even if you only want to do the contest, or if you only want to just be there for the food and the games, I would encourage you to come out on Saturday, March 7th again.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage anyone to go. I think it's going to be a good time like it was last year, and I think it'll be a good opportunity as well to just kind of see these different organizations, including the Equinox, and see what they're all about and possibly join as well if people are interested in that.
Yeah, I was at last year's event, and even as a member of an org myself, I remember how interesting it was to go around to all the other media orgs that I either didn't know about or didn't know too much about, and a lot of them have a lot to offer, whether it's their events that they put on, the spaces that they have, or even joining the org themselves. They and we as the Equinox do a lot for the campus, and this one event is a really good way to showcase that and invite people.
Yeah, and it's, whether you're already a part of an org or you're not a part of any of the orgs, you just want like a fun night out, sort of things to do on a Saturday night. Midterms are around this time, spring break is coming up. There's not a lot, going on in terms of like fun things to do to like, offer like a reset. And I think this is great for that. And I think just like building that community with other students on campus who are super into media just as much as, you might be, is a great opportunity. So again, trying to get as many people to come out as possible. And also Hoodie will be there. So do keep that in mind. But with that being said, let's jump into the news recap here. So our first story comes to us from our staffer, Sam, once again. This is a piece about Women's History Month, particularly what's going on campus and the main event being during the month, which is the Outstanding Women of New Hampshire celebration, which is different nominees honored. People were able to nominate folks for different categories. They have like a student one, they have like faculty and staff one, I think, and then they have like state and then region. Those are just people that like have, women that have made a significant impact in a given area. They have like different themes every year. And it's a nice just little event to sort of, celebrate the month in a way, but also recognize, again, the work that these outstanding women have done and contributed to the campus, the state, region, etc.
Yeah, I'm very happy that they're doing an event right here on campus about it. It's kind of also similar to what they did for Native American Heritage Month, which we covered last semester, which also makes me very happy. And I think the variety is also really nice, being able to honor both student, faculty, multiple different categories. I think that's really incredible that they included that to honor a variety of different women from different walks of life. It's just a great step forward.
Yeah, I can touch on that student and faculty part too. I think all the time of how awesome it is that we have opportunities because even at Keene State where we do a lot, whether it's with the community or after we graduate, I think it's great for college students to be shown that they are important and that they do make strides in whatever fields it is, and especially for Women's History Month, I think it's awesome that we are able to showcase that, and faculty, even faculty, if you're a lot of the year you're doing hard work, you're planning, you're prepping, and you're delivering on all cylinders throughout the year, and for your work to be recognized in a specific field, both student and faculty, I think it's awesome that they're able to be represented and shown for their hard work and dedication.
Definitely, and it's been a recurring tradition, that Outstanding Women's Ceremony, for quite a few years now. I've been to a couple of them my time here, and they're just a really good time. The celebratory event, and it's nice to see, when I went, just people who are like, either related in some way to like the nominees or just wanted to like come out and see, and celebrate. I think it's just a great time to like pause and recognize that. And it's perfect for a month like, Women's History Month. So, good stuff there. But with that being said, let's move on to our region state top story. So this comes to us from Jeremy Margolis at the Concord Monitor. And this is about the state requesting the state Supreme Court to reverse a landmark ruling that essentially said that the state systemically underfunds education and that they have to fund it more, given the state constitution says that there needs to be like an adequate funding. So basically the ruling had to do with Claremont School District in particular, but that kind of springboarded into saying, overall the state needs to do better. And this is something the state hasn't responded to the ruling. It's been quite a few years, and they haven't increased funding, obviously, and so it's been a very contentious topic among the legislator, among, I guess, the current governor and possibly former governors, because it just hasn't gotten done. And it's no secret that we've been talking pretty much every single week about just why it's so bad that New Hampshire doesn't fund education as much as it should. This is mainly particularly pertaining to, I think, like K through 12, like public schools. But even given that, I could say the same. You know, I went to a public school in New Hampshire, so I know that it's you know, there could be more improvement with that, and I think just it's a matter of, you know, the way that the tax system is sort of set up, and sort of just not enough money going into it, and then maybe poor decisions in terms of things like the education freedom accounts where you're putting a lot of public funds into private schools.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that they should increase funding to education in New Hampshire. I think that's been a big issue. We've seen the effects of budget cuts right here on campus. I think there's at least a story each week that's in some way in regards to the budget cuts or loss of faculty. And in specific regards to Claremont, I have a suite mate from there, so it always kind of resonates with me a bit whenever we bring it up. But they got hit really hard with everything that's happening. And I think the state just needs to do better. They just need to do better and to actually fund education in a way that will benefit everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys talk about, because we talk about it all the time in our editorial about, you know, post high school funding from the state, and it shouldn't even be a conversation of whether or not we should thoroughly fund our public schools at the elementary, middle, and high level. There's no reason to why we take away. Yep, we're not going to fund colleges. We're not going to fund high schools. We're not going to fund public middle schools. It's just all going to be private. And there's no way that I can wrap my mind around the fact that we are the state that is live free or die, and yet we're going to take funding away from our public ed. It doesn't make any sense. And once you leave your public ed, if you do, because there's no funding to it, so your education that you won't get may not be as sound as it was before, then you have your options of going to UNH or schools around the area that are very expensive because we don't fund that education as well. So all around the board, up and down, every grade level, we're just leaving students out to dry and leaving the youth out to dry.
Yeah, I definitely share that sentiment, but here's a good transitional, because the top story in student life, here's maybe a reason why we should fund education, is because there's amazing students like senior Olivia Kaminsky in the math program, who is doing great work over there, and sort of just this profile story from our staffer, Eliani, and really good pictures from our staffer, Janet, as well, talking about just her academic journey, how she switched majors 12 times, which is insane, but then just eventually finding the passion within math, and now wanting to seek, you know, a PhD program and become a math professor. I think just really inspiring stuff in this article, and also some quotes from one of her professors, who thinks very highly of her as well. So, you know, maybe educational institutions are doing some good things, I think.
I definitely agree with that sentiment, and I applaud them for all the great work they've done. I applaud every student for all the great work they've done amidst the budget cuts and moving forward despite everything. And I agree that funding higher education better would definitely allow further opportunities for these students to continue to do these things.
Yeah, I remember reading the article and the amount of different programs and majors that were tried out before finalizing on the math. And I mean, the expression that we were all told heading into our first year was, you know, the major you select isn't the major you're going to finish with. And the student definitely took that for granted and took it seriously. So I mean, any student who gets to experience a couple majors and gets to experience different fields, a way of learning, different way of sort of showing your knowledge is super cool. And the fact that they were able to sort of find one, and although it was math, which is not always the favorite one that I've heard, is pretty exceptional. And to stick with that and to be proud of that too is awesome.
Yeah, so big ups to her, and good luck also as she applied for PhD program. Still waiting to hear back as of the publication of this article and of this podcast. So best of luck. And I just love any time we get an opportunity to feature students from sometimes, you know, not very thought about, you know, areas of campus, and sort of just being able to elevate them is great. With that being said, though, we can get into our editorial from this week. So this is a piece about the recent military actions as it pertains to Iran. So the United States carried out bombings sort of in conjunction with Israel with the main goal of killing the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and he did die. But there are also other implications, such as the bombings having killed several, I think, school-age children, girls at a girls' school, and also just civilians and sort of, also so far already service members from the U.S. have been lost, in addition to several who are injured. So we're already, the target in question, they reached that, but also we're still continuing on the operation, at least as President Trump has recently said, the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll see how that pans out. But as of now, we are in some sort of conflict. Obviously, only Congress can declare a war. But, these actions are sort of legally blurry when it comes to Congress has the ability to say that you can do things unless there's an imminent threat. And we talked about in the editorial how we don't really see how there was an imminent threat. Perhaps maybe an imminent threat to Israel. But if you start thinking of imminent threats to Israel as threats to us, then there's kind of a flaw in that logic. But we just talked about all of the sort of how it's very analogous to the war on terror from the early 2000s as a result of 9/11, and sort of how many lives were lost in that on the U.S. side, on the civilian side in the Middle East, how that proved to be unsuccessful and quite disastrous, and how we're kind of seeing shades of that again with these recent actions.
Yeah, and as we spoke to in our editorial discussion, when the U.S. does these kind of things, they never work out well. Iraq, Vietnam, Afghanistan, it never works in our favor, and it just ends in more civilian casualties. And I also agree that it's very problematic to kind of think that a threat to Israel is a threat to us, and the implications of that. I don't think that we should be getting involved in Israel's war, and I don't think we should be supporting them either, given what they've done in the last couple of months and even in the last 50 plus years against Gaza and Palestine. So it's all just a very problematic situation.
Yeah, it's insanely problematic. And I think something that Nate said too is that they did kill the leader. They did kill the Ayatollah. And I believe the quote I saw from Pete Hegseth was, "We're going to punch them while they're down." And that is just like a bully motive. It's not something that is useful for us or anyone else in the world. No Americans are better off from that and from this operation. I mean, I'm 21, and when I saw that one of the 4 killed from the Iranian strike was 20 years old, it really sort of sat with me that, like, yeah, this affects all people, all ages, and even someone as young as me and us can be implicated in this war. I mean, if you're a Granite Stater, I saw 30 minutes ago that the New Hampshire National Guard has been not deployed, but has been sort of prepared to help out with our strike and our moving forward with Iran. So if you're Granite State, if you're young, you're old, and you think this may not apply to you, or you think this may not be a vested interest of yours, I'd think again, because it obviously is. In the past 2 months, we've seen 2 military operations go into 2 different countries with the hope and with sort of the messaging that we are liberating these people and we are helping them out. And yet both of these countries support, or not support, but are big oil suppliers for China. So if we're being told that it's one thing, and it's obviously not, and we continue off the backs, like Chloe said, of what Israel's doing and how Israel is feeling, it is very un-American from the person who said there will be no new wars, and from the person who said that we are America first, supposedly. Despite whether you agree or disagree with that, he's going against what he said, and he's going against what many Americans said. It's a tragedy that I get to be the 20-year-old, we get to be the 20-year-olds, like 20 years ago, that we're growing up with an American government that is going after countries in the Middle East for no reason other than to take them down in a very ferocious way that has no cause, no just, and I can't believe I get to say that I'm in my 20s living throughout a war in the Middle East. It's insane.
Right, yeah, and just, touching on, like, the hypocrisy like we did when it comes to the Trump administration, and because even the early polling so far we've seen about this conflict, people disapprove of the military action that was taken, people disapprove of going further, and then you already have had Trump deliver remarks where he basically says that more American soldier lives will be lost. And sort of, it almost just sounds like you're brushing it off as like a given, like that has to happen, when obviously he has the power to make it not happen. And so, escalating a conflict like this, and getting involved when there was no threat to us imminently. There's not really that much of a justification this time around. I mean, like, the war on terror, there was a lot of false justifications with that, but obviously the inciting incident 9/11 did happen. So, to a certain extent you could say, oh, well, that was a thing that caused us to want to try to find who did this and whatever and yada yada. But at the same time, now it's just such even from that standpoint, it's such a different situation and definitely not a good one. And I just think, the reason why I chose to do this as the editorial, typically we want to focus on issues which are specific to Keene State, specific to what affects higher education funding, various budget cuts, things like that. But like, it affects the entire country, and including a lot of students who are, now there's that fear of like, is there gonna be any further action to the point where if there was a war, would there be then a draft? Like things like this where it's like you have to worry about that now when you didn't have to before. And then you sort of look back historically and you see the start of other wars, and you see, maybe there wasn't enough people that spoke out when they should have. So this is sort of, I think, our way of speaking out against what's going on.
Yeah, and we've already seen, like, the jokes about how Donald Trump sounds like Lord Farquaad. Like, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. And I think it's just really disheartening for our president to basically say, that's just what's going to happen now. It's a lack of care for American lives or civilian casualties in Iran. And it's not even surprising from him, given his track record. But it's just so horrible that we live in a time where we have to be worried about a draft now. I've never really even thought about that in my life, but in the last few weeks I have thought about it. And it's scary. It's a scary thought there might be a draft for a new war in the Middle East, and it's just, nobody wants that.
No, it's crazy to think, and to think that it's just so seamless for them. It seems like Chloe said, like, oh, he sounds like Lord Farquaad because he says we're all like, it makes sense that people are gonna die for this. It doesn't make sense that Americans are gonna die. Sure, it makes sense if Israel's going to be an aggressor and Israel's going to do whatever they want to do with Iran. It makes sense. But it does not make sense that Americans have to die for this, or that Americans should be involved in this whatsoever. Now, there's also not the thing of just let it be. I think we should have some sort of intel, some sort of know about of what's going on in other places. But there should not be as much of a hand of America inside of the Middle East and inside of other parts of the world where we don't need it.
Yeah, definitely. But I do think it was just, again, an important topic to discuss right now, and the sort of almost immediate fallout of those actions. So I'm glad that we chose that to discuss, and go read the full editorial, of course, if you can, either in papers or online, because it's really important. That being said, we're going to end off the podcast here on a couple higher notes, so no pun intended, because the arts and entertainment top story is about the concert band performance, and this is sort of like a special one. It's part of a program that they did for like Black History Month, and sort of the Music of Social Justice series is what it's called. I think they've been doing it for a few years now, perhaps, but this particular performance is talking about exploring music through African diaspora, so meaning like people who were born Africa or have African heritage that are now relocated to different parts of the world, such as the United States. And then the theme of roots, which obviously meaning like ancestral roots. And so two artists came to do performance, in particular Benti Ilivold, and who was a euphonium artist, and Dr. Jasmine Pigote, who was a tubist and composer. And so they gave performances, and I think that was part of the heavy metal, quote unquote, which meant like heavy metal, like instruments, like not like the genre, And then they had a concert band performance where they played certain pieces, again, trying to touch on those themes relating to, you know, the social justice series, relating to Black History Month during their concert. So it was a nice little coverage from our staffer, Michael, here. And a nice little sort of, again, sort of like we talked about with the Women's History Month, just trying to commemorate.
Yeah, and as a former band player, I think it's beautiful to represent diversity through music. I've seen that with my own eyes in the past. And I think it's a way where all audiences can indulge in it and understand it. It's just a very nice way to communicate things to people in an easy to watch setting that's just beautiful, and you get to listen to some great music, and it's easily digestible. But I think that's a great way to really represent social justice and Black History Month.
Yeah, I think we had spoken about the Women's History Month earlier, and when I read this about the Black History Month performance, I was sort of taken back and sort of confused because I hadn't been exposed to too much music where it sort of conveyed whole messages like that, and especially music where it's not not a lot of words presented. It's very musical in its foundation, and just that. I was fascinated by the sort of comments we got for that, and how much people were sort of appreciated that, because I hadn't had much, like I said, experience sort of just with music, and that just alone, sounds and notes and rhythms sort of conveying an entire message, and for a whole group of people too. I just think it's super, super fascinating.
Definitely. But with that being said, we can jump into the sports top story to end it off, or what we sort of ended up picking as what to put up on socials. So this was a piece from you, Jacob, with help from another Jacob, our senior photographer, Jacob
Double
Friedman, who did some interviewing, so reporting on this event. And this was a charity live stream that the Keene State esports team put on, which lasted 14 hours, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m., and they raised more than $500 for the charity Extra Life. So this money was going towards Boston Children's Hospital, and it's sort of a platform where it's, you know, reinvesting money, I guess, back into the community, and sort of a message that resonated with the team overall, the coaching staff. And so I think it was a nice little event. I think you've seen, like, before, like Twitch streams and like gaming live streams for charity. It's like a pretty common thing that's done. So given that gaming is the whole sort of point of esports in, you know, a competitive sense, sort of playing off of what others have done, and, you know, using what platform they do have for good is always nice to see. And also we haven't had some like more extensive esports coverage in a little bit, so it was good to sort of jump back into that.
And we've spoken before about organizations on campus doing charity donations, and I think it really shows how they can have a very big impact on things. Like, just because you're a small college organization at a rather small college to begin with doesn't mean that you can't donate to charities and make a difference in somebody's lives.
Yeah, I think a lot of orgs, and especially since this is in sports, a lot of our sports teams, they do participate in a lot of philanthropy. But I think what I was really invested in with this story is that the whole esports team, coaches, and all the different players and athletes, they were like, no, we are going to do this ourselves. There was no sort of directive from a director or anything like that. They weren't sort of pushed in a way to put this on. They themselves were like, no, we really want to do this. And from what I watched of it, they did a really good job in preparation and in having all members of the team sort of come together and play different games and do different community activities. And they had a push-up challenge, a whole different thing that they themselves took the time out of their Saturday night to put on this huge live stream and be together and have a lot of fun and surpass their goal of, I think their goal was 500 and they raised 572 or 3 was the number. And I just think that's really awesome.
But yeah, it's just a nice coverage all around of just sort of, you know, a different sort of sports story other than something that you would normally see in terms of like even game recaps or more involved game recaps, or, you know, talking about like a profile. It's just a sort of like very different type of story that you see, but also still, of course, in the sports realm. So I think it's cool to just get like, you know, that diversified coverage, and looking out for like nice little things like this, especially at a time like this. I feel like it's just important to lift people's spirits in some way. So nice little event, nice coverage. So, but with that being said, we can end it off here. So as always, I would like to extend a special shout out to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum Zach Keenan, to the creator of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director Elijah Fisher, and to the editor of Noxcast, our very own media director Noelle Hisgen.